What's up, fight fans? UFC 279 is this Saturday, headlined by Nate Diaz and Hamza Shamayev. It's a massive card that you don't want to miss. And right now, I have one of the best MMA journalists on the show to help me break it all down. Daniel Vreeland of Top Turtle Podcast is on the show. Daniel, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. You've had me on your show a number of times, so happy to have you on mine to break this card down. First, before we dive into all that, I just want people to know where they can find your work. So the floor is yours. Tell people what you're doing now and where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me at a whole bunch of different places. I host a couple of different podcasts, like you mentioned, the Top Turtle MMA podcast, which technically, if you want to see my work, you can see it on every single UFC broadcast because those fancy numbers next to people's names are partially my doing because the Top Turtle MMA podcast, one of the few podcasts that have a say in the voting matters of the UFC. So we are pretty proud of that. So you can see my work there and there. I also host 4 times a week the MMA gambling podcast over on the SGPN network. Which I've been doing with Jeff Fox for almost 2 years now. Really like it over there. I also write about betting with baseball and betting with basketball and of course MMA over there as well. And I still do some work for Cage Side Press from time to time. And that's also obviously where you can catch the Top Turtle MMA podcast. So yeah, I'm all over the place. Got my hand in a lot of honeypots.
Well, things are going well for you. And I know you're a busy guy, so I appreciate your time to dive into this card here with me today. Let's start right at the top, the main event. Hamza Shamayev, Nate Diaz. If you can't tell from what's behind me, I'm a little bit of a Diaz fan. I like both of them. Nate, Nick, it doesn't matter. I do cheer for him. But this really seems like a difficult matchup for Nate. When you look at the odds, I mean, Bet Online has him at a plus 900 dog. Bovada has him at plus 600, plus 500 at MyBookie. He's a massive underdog. Hamza is supposed to go in there and win this fight. Do you like this matchup for Hamza? Do you feel like this should be an easy fight for him? Or do you feel like Nate, the big underdog here, could pull the upset?
You know, the thing is, I've always kind of been one of the biggest naysayers of Khamzat Chimaev, pretty much since he's come through. You know, like I'll be honest with you, I picked Gilbert Burns to beat him. And, you know, Gilbert Burns went in there and put on a heck of a performance. I'll be honest. I think there's a path to victory for Nate Diaz if you want to be that, you know, that fan who really believes he can pull it off. I think, you know, Khamzat's boxing leaves a little bit to be desired. I think ultimately his best bet is to just take Nate down and hit some ground and pound from, you know, half guard or whatever he's going to hit it from. The problem there is he looks scared to grapple a little bit with Gilbert Burns. So like, you know, maybe he gets scared to grapple with Nate Diaz, who's also phenomenal at jiu-jitsu, and we wind up seeing a boxing match. And I don't think he's a better boxer at the end of the day. You know, also his cardio is not better than Nate. So if you want to trick yourself into saying that Nate Diaz has got a chance here, I think he does. And I think he does even to the tune of more than maybe what you see the odds at, right? Like negative 900 or plus 900 rather is an absurd number. Like he's got a better chance than that. But you know, if you're asking me to put my gun to my head and make a pick of a winner, of course I'm picking Khamzat, right? Like, cause you know, that path to victory that I mentioned where, you know, he probably should just take him down and get to side control or half guard, do nothing else, but, you know, just land ground and pound, stay out of submission trouble, you know, try to make him bleed until you get the Dr. TKO stoppage. Cause we all know Diaz brothers bleed like, you know, basically if you look at them or sneeze in their direction. So I'm going to say Khamzat probably does that. But yeah, like you said, there's chances out there for Nate, and my God, what a story it would be if he did it too.
Yeah. Well, so do you feel like obviously if Nate wins this fight, it's going to have to be late. It's going to have to be in the 4th or the 5th round, and he's going to have to catch him with a sub maybe. I mean, I don't necessarily know that I see Diaz TKOing Khamzat. I feel like his best bet would be to submit him. Do you feel, what are the chances you think that actually happens?
You know, I'm a little bit lower on the idea of him subbing him and a little bit higher on the idea of him TKOing him, to be completely honest with you, because if you look back at Nate Diaz's career of submissions, and you know, obviously he's a phenomenal jiu-jitsu specialist. A lot of his submission stuff happens early in fights, right? Like you go back to the Jim Miller headliner down in New Jersey years ago, and he snatches up that guillotine early in the fight. You know, you have the Kurt Pellegrino triangle where he flexes on him. That happened early in the fight. And a lot of that happens because that's when he's his sharpest, and that's when people are dry, and that's when, you know, it kind of he's ready for all of that. I don't think he's going to like pull some rabbit out of his hat in the 4th or 5th round that Khamzat wouldn't have seen in rounds 1, 2, or 3. So like, I'm a little bit lower on that, but you know, we just saw him in a 5th round tag Leon Edwards and wobble him. And the same Leon Edwards, who, you know, looked pretty damn good in the 5th round against Kamaru Usman. And, you know, we also saw Khamzat Chimaev in the 3rd round against Gilbert Burns. And I mean, Burns tagged him in those rounds, in those later rounds, as he got tired. So if you wanted to, you know, draw a path to victory for him here, I don't know that submission is the one I would pick. I think I would probably say he clubs him with one of those right hands with like some really sharp boxing as his cardio stays and Khamzat's leaves. I mean, of course, you could also say, you know, he does what he does to Leon and then jumps on a guillotine or jumps on a rear naked choke or whatever. But yeah, like I really do think that his best bet is, you know, just letting those hands fly late.
Okay. Well, another question that I feel like the Diaz fans out there really want to know is, if Nate loses this fight, is this the last time we're going to see him in the UFC octagon? Is he all but gone?
You know, I got bad news for you. I think if he wins this fight, it's the last time we see him too. I don't think it matters. You know, if you listen to the interviews with him and you listen to the interviews with Dana White this week, they're both singing completely different tunes. And it sounds a lot like Dana is just saying the company line, the line he's supposed to say. You know, he's saying, you know, we'd love to have Nate back. And, you know, we'll be talking with Nate's people after this. And like, you know, if you haven't talked to Nate's people before this, like Nate's been pretty vocal about how he feels about his contract situation and the fights that are being offered. You know, he said he wanted Tony Ferguson, or he said he wanted Michael Chandler, or he said he wanted this guy or that guy. And they gave him Khamzat Chimaev. There's a reason he's getting this fight, is they don't want Nate Diaz to go out on top of the world, because he could walk into a place like Bellator and cash a massive check, or PFL and cash a massive check, or, you know, boxing and cash a massive check. And Dana wants to be part of that massive check, or he wants to hurt it, you know, and I don't mean to, you know, accuse him of nefarious things, but that's exactly what this is. It's a nefarious booking. We've seen the UFC do this time and time again. They either book you with somebody on the way out that they feel like you can't beat, or who beating is completely unimpressive, you know, and I kind of thought that was going to happen with Diaz. I was like, he's either getting somebody like Khamzat Chimaev, or he's getting, you know, and no insult to these names, somebody like Drew Dober, who, like, yeah, the win would be nice, and Drew Dober's a hell of a name, but at the end of the day, like, who's selling Nate Diaz on a Drew Dober win? So I always kind of knew this was going to happen, and I'd hold out very little hope that we're going to see Nate Diaz in the UFC again.
And you know what's really sad about that too is the trilogy fight with Conor McGregor.
Right there.
That doesn't happen. I mean, that is just a shame for all of the MMA fans out there. If that fight never comes to fruition, that is I mean, the UFC dropped the ball big time there, because, you know, that right there. You want to talk about making money? The UFC is about making money. That's what Dana White wants to do. You got to make that fight, right?
Well, yeah, and the weird thing about it too is it always kind of felt like the UFC was just putting it off, because they were like, it's there when we need it. You know, when we need a headliner and we need to, you know, pull Conor McGregor out of his pseudo retirement or whatever the hell he's in, like when we need a big money fight to, like, you know, put us over for the year, or like impress investors, or because a main event dropped out, we can go to Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3. It's there. And I think they just sat on it too long. You know, I think they were like, you know, it'll be there. We'll go do these other things first. And like, it's always an ace up the sleeve. And they just, you know, left it up there too long, and it's not there anymore. And it's a shame that it didn't work out. And it's a shame that we'll never see that fight. But yeah, like I do think that's water under the bridge now.
Yeah, really unfortunate. Well, either way, this main event has so many interesting layers to it. So, you know, people are going to be staying up till past midnight here on the East Coast to watch this exciting main event of Nate and Hamza. Let's move to the co-main event, Tony Ferguson and the Leech Jingling Lee, and talk about someone else that I feel like is on his way out the door, Tony Ferguson. And it's kind of crazy to me, because at one point in time, I mean, he was the 1B to Nurmagomedov's 1A. This guy was as good as it gets at 155. And right now, to me, he just kind of looks like a shell of himself. At some point, fighters go over that cliff, and I just don't know that they're ever the same. And unfortunately, I feel like that's the case with Tony Ferguson. The Leech should win this fight. He's a minus 315 favorite. If he doesn't win this fight, I don't know what that says about his prospects for, you know, climbing the ranks or being someone relevant you know, in his weight class. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I'm actually going to defend Tony Ferguson for a quick second, because I actually think, while he has declined, he's not the Tony Ferguson that we saw submit Kevin Lee for the interim belt all those years ago. I do think he's better than people are giving him credit for. You know, like we're talking about 4 straight losses, and 4 straight losses always feels bad. And it feels truly terrible here, because he's looked quite bad in a couple of them, but it's a knockout to Justin Gaethje that didn't happen until the 5th round. He survived 4 rounds with Justin Gaethje. Not an easy thing to do. He went the distance with Charles Oliveira. That's right. He went the distance with Charles Oliveira, something not a lot of people are doing. He went the distance with Beneil Dariush, and then he beat Michael Chandler in round 1. That's right. He was beating Michael Chandler in round 1. So yeah, like if you just look at results, we're talking about 2 decision losses and 2 KO losses. And that looks bad for a guy who was an interim champion and who he kind of pegged as being a big guy. And of course, being 36, it's easy to come up with that retirement sort of narrative. But at the end of the day, I actually think he's doing a little bit better than people are giving him credit for. And he is a little bit less deteriorated than people are saying. But with that being said, I think the move up to welterweight was the dumbest thing in the world he could have done. Like, it's terrible. Like, the things that he's having problems with, right, are, first of all, takedown defense, right? Beneil Dariush and Charles Oliveira took him down, held him there, made it look like he could never get up. And the second thing was his chin got tested twice. Once by, once again, 2 guys who hit really hard, Michael Chandler and Justin Gaethje. But he went up to a weight class where people hit harder and is facing a guy with good offensive wrestling. So, like, what are we doing here, Tony? Like, of all of the people you could have fought, like, this is a guy who could have used a Drew Dober fight, right? This is a guy who could have used to go down and fight a Brad Riddell, somebody ranked, 14th or 15th in the, not that I think he would do really well against Jalen Turner, but somebody like Jalen Turner. Like, show that you're still relevant in the division. Show you're the guy who beat Michael Chandler in round 1, and do it against the guy who's not the cream of the crop of the division. And he found a guy who wasn't the cream of the crop of a division. He just went to the wrong division to do that. Now he's grossly undersized. I hate that he changed training camps and decided to just take a fight right away now that he's working at Jackson Wink. Even if I thought that was a good move for him personally, like, it's not enough time. So there's so many things I hate about the way that he went about this fight and the way that this matchmaking went about. So while I'm defending his deterioration and thinking that he's maybe not as deteriorated as people are sort of writing him off as, I do think he gets just walloped here. I think Li Jingliang gets a knockout too.
Yeah, I actually, you make a lot of great points, Daniel, here for as far as Ferguson goes, and I don't want to discredit him in any way, shape, or form, because again, he's one of the best of all time, as far as that weight class goes, 155. But their weight classes for a reason. So to go up to 170 and face the younger, hungrier, Lee here, I just feel like it's a bad matchup. So I'm with you there. I think he gets finished. Talking about another guy that changed weight classes, Ferguson went up to 170. Kevin Holland has went down to 170, and he's looked pretty good thus far. He's got a tough task on his hands with Daniel Rodriguez. Holland's a minus 190 favorite, Rodriguez plus 165 dog. How do you see this one going?
I actually low-key like the dog in this one. I like Daniel Rodriguez. I think, first of all, you said he's having a lot of success coming down to welterweight. Daniel Rodriguez, 5-1 at welterweight since coming to the UFC. And that's coming off the Contender Series when he was on an episode where first of all, he won, and every other winner got given a contract except for him. And then, he obviously gets in the UFC a little bit later. He's rattled off 5 out of 6 wins. And I'll say this, he does so with like a wonderful mix of having a great chin, being an aggressive boxer, and having kind of low-key good wrestling. I think people forget how good his wrestling is. When he beat Rico Farrington on the Contender Series, like, he scored like 4 or 5 takedowns. Ultimately, it's probably what didn't earn him the contract, right? He shot too many takedowns. But like, he's low-key a good wrestler. And obviously, we've talked about the issues with Kevin Holland's wrestling. But at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think he just like nonstop wrestles Kevin Holland, but I think that wrestling puts enough fear into the back of Kevin Holland's mind that he doesn't like let go the way he ought to against a guy like Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez turns up that pressure and puts his back against the cage. I really do think Daniel Rodriguez is going to have a surprising amount of success here.
Okay, I'm really intrigued for this one. I really could be maybe the fight of the night as far as the main card goes. Both of these guys are fairly evenly matched, so excited to see what happens there. Let's move to Irene Aldana and Macy Chesson. Macy is a plus 145 dog. Irene a minus 170 favorite. Any dog money here, or do you feel like Aldana gets the win?
I wish. I really do like Macy Chesson. I've interviewed her like half a dozen times. She's just like a great personality, an incredible person. But at the end of the day, I think she's kind of met her match in the style of Irene Aldana, right? Irene Aldana incredible boxer, right? And in addition to being an incredible boxer, a great master of distance and a very long fighter. Those are things that Macy Chesson kind of relies on, right? Because while Macy is very tall and very long, she doesn't use it like a very tall, long boxer. She uses it almost like in lieu of having great boxing so that she can set up her wrestling and she can set up her grappling. But she's now fighting somebody who doesn't need to get on the inside of her to beat her. Like if you look back at some of her previous fights, what worked really well was like, she just jabbed away at Marion Renault from distance. Marion Renault has to get on the inside. She has no option. And then Chesson could take over with some of her grappling. And here with Aldana can pick her apart from the outside. Aldana can make sure she's never on the inside. And if she makes a mistake trying to get in herself, Aldana turns people's lights out. She's won twice in a row by knockout. Like her last 2 wins are both by knockout, with only a loss to Holly Holm in between those. And really, if you look at Aldana's record and the people she's losing to, it is the cream of the crop of the division. She's only losing to the very best people. And while I like Macy Chesson, I think she's got a bright future. I think she could probably, at one point in time, put together a run. I just think her hands are kind of lagging too far behind at this point for this to be the jump she's making, this weekend.
I'm with you. I have Aldana winning this one as well. Let's move to Johnny Walker in Ian Cutelaba. Man, I can't wait for this one. Talk about another fight that it really is just must-see TV. I mean, Cutelaba, he comes out so strong. We all know that. He comes looking for blood right from the opening bell. Johnny Walker's been away for a little while. He's the underdog here, a plus 185 dog. Cutelaba minus 220 favorite, which, I guess that's fair, right? But Johnny Walker, when you look at his past fights, I mean, this is a guy that, a lot of people felt like he could have won the title at one point in time. So what kind of a Johnny Walker are we going to see in this fight? Do you think he comes back and gets the W, or is Cutelaba going to get him out of there?
What kind of Johnny Walker are we going to see is a loaded ass question, because like that dude, man, has he been through some weird iterations? And here's the thing, a lot of people are being like, the straight blast gym version of Johnny Walker is tentative, not fun to watch, and not particularly good. And I tend to agree. Now, he said he's made some changes for this camp and he's going to come out looking a little bit more like his old self. The only problem I have with that is his old self still wasn't good at defending takedowns, right? Like his old self still lost to Nikita Krylov, mostly by Krylov taking him down a bunch of times. So, while I want to trust Johnny Walker and say like, oh, if he comes back the flying knee version or the spinning back fist version or, whatever version we need to see of him, he could beat Cutelaba. And I still do think he could, because it's light heavyweight. Anybody can beat anybody. But I'm just remembering the Ian Cutelaba who came out in the first round against Dustin Jacoby, 10-8'd him in the first round, which, by the way, 10-8'ing Dustin Jacoby, incredible. That guy's, a great kickboxer, good at takedown defense, and he had him inches away from being finished. Like, I just can't imagine Johnny Walker surviving that. Like, I can't imagine the Johnny Walker who just got deaded by Jamal Hill, or the Johnny Walker who got taken down regularly by Nikita Krylov. I can't imagine that guy stuffing takedowns from Ian Cutelaba and working his boxing. As long as Cutelaba comes out and shoots a takedown in the first 2 minutes, I think this fight's his.
Okay, fair enough. Well, there are a couple of interesting matchups on the undercard. Let's start with the main event of the undercard, which is Julian Erosa, Hakeem Dawodu. I understand you just interviewed Juicy J, as did I fairly recently. He's an underdog here, plus 185. Dawodu minus 220 favorite. I mean, Erosa, we know how good he is with those Darce chokes. If he gets him there, that really, could present itself. But Dawodu, his stand-up is elite. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. And you mentioned before the possibility of Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez being fight of the night. I actually think this is fight of the night. I almost guarantee it will be, because the way Juicy J just kind of like lets him fly, especially against the guy with the kickboxing like Hakeem Dawodu does, and the Thai boxing that Hakeem Dawodu does. I just think this is destined to be an absolute fireworks from bell to bell. But my problem with picking Juicy J, and I hate talking about somebody I just interviewed and picking against them, but like my problem here is that like all of those submissions and those Darce chokes that you're talking about are tag him and bag him, right? Like he tags him with the hands and he subs them. And just like Hakeem does not get tagged, unless you count his UFC debut against Danny Henry when he ate a right hook, I think 48 seconds in or something like that. Unless you count that right hook, that dude's never been tagged in like his whole life. So to just kind of assume that Juicy J is going to have that open up, man, I really don't think it's going to happen. In Do I think he could get the wrestling going? No, not really. The only person who really gotten the wrestling going against Davido is Movsar Evloev, and I certainly don't put Arosa's wrestling on that level. So then the last thing is he going to bang it out with him and win a decision there or knock him out? It's hard for me to imagine that. So really, what I see playing out here is Hakeem just being a little bit sharper on the feet in a lot of different ways, and at the end of the day, that probably being enough for like a decision and just a gritty war. But don't get me wrong, Rosa, a very live dog, has those submission skills should he, find himself in one of those positions. But I really think me and Hakeem's got this one.
There is something about Erosa, though, where he has like an X factor where he just has a way of finding the whatever it may be to get his opponent out of there. And those long limbs, I think he's going to be the longer fighter here, have the longer reach and everything. So that could come into play. I like Julian, so I'm pulling for him. I hope he gets the W. Another fight I wanted to get your take on real quick is Darian Weeks and Johan Lioness. You just interviewed Darian Weeks, and Johan, he's got a lot of power. He's coming off the first loss of his career. This is almost a pick 'em. It's very, very close. Plus 105 dog is Johan. How do you see this one playing out?
Man, you put me on the spot to pick against my guys twice, which is it's hard to do. But you mentioned it right at the top. Johan's got power. And really, when I've looked at what Darian Weeks has done in the UFC so far, and I'm color me impressed. This dude has fought. He went 15 hard minutes with Brian Barberena, which isn't easy to do. But the problem is that in those fights, while he got a little bit of his wrestling going, he didn't get a lot of top control, right? And I'm not even sure he's necessarily the better wrestler here against Lioness. So like that already is alarming. Then you talk about him on the feet, and he lands. Like he lands well. He lands good volume, but he leaves himself open to be countered. And against a guy like Johan Lioness, who puts so much on every single one of his punches, I just think that's so dangerous. Like Johan's got crazy power. Like I think back to his CFFC knockout of Evan Cutts. Evan Cutts is a tough guy. I pegged him to be in the UFC a long time ago. And, I think he's fighting up in Canada this weekend coming up, or a weekend after that. And like, he certainly could punch his ticket soon. Lioness just laid him out. So at the end of the day, I think I'm going to pick Lioness. I think he throws too hard. There's going to be one or two times where he touches Weeks. And I just don't think the people who Weeks have fought hit like he does.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And I feel like he's an even more motivated fighter after the first loss of his career. Dialed in. He hasn't done any interviews. Usually I can interview him every time before a fight. Nope, not this time. He is completely focused. So I think we're going to see a very, very dangerous white lion here in this one. Any other fights on the undercard, Daniel, that stand out to you that you feel like, maybe we need to circle and keep our eyes on?
I mean, there's just a couple that I think are really interesting. So first of all, I love Chad and Helliger. I think Chad and Helliger is super underrated. Him fighting Alatang Hali in the, I think it's third fight of the night. He's got really fun range. He's got really fun knockout power. So I'm interested to see how he fights there, especially being an underdog. And then the two that I'm interested in on top of that, and it's maybe less fights, but it's more fighters that I'm interested in. Like I'm always interested in Chris Barnett. I think he's so fun to watch. Seeing a guy who's shaped like that, move like that, it's incredible. But in addition to that, like so many people wrote him off after that last loss. And obviously he had some really heavy stuff going on in his family at that time. So for him to have gone through all of that and like had a not so great performance against a really tough opponent last time out, I think people are writing him off massively in this fight. I think he's got a great chance here against Jake Collier, a guy who's, not particularly much faster or, doesn't have an incredible wrestling game. So, I'm looking forward to seeing him bounce back from that really tough fight. And I don't think it's going to be a competitive fight in any way, shape, or form. But anytime Jelton Almeida is fighting, I'm there for it. Like, I got to see this guy fight. And unfortunately, he was originally supposed to fight a top 10 heavyweight. Instead, he gets the late replacement in Anton Turkali, a guy who's coming straight off the Contender Series, didn't get a contract, but they needed somebody last second to take a beating, and he was willing to do it. So I'm interested in seeing Jelton win impressively, and then hopefully get one of those huge step ups he's really needed. Because I'll tell you a little insight into the rankings. He's been in my top 15 for heavyweight for months. Like months, he's been in my top 15, and not in enough panelists for him to actually show up in the rankings, but he's getting votes, or at least a vote. So I'm looking forward to seeing him again.
All right. Well, it really is a fantastic card. I'll be watching it at home in my man cave. I'm sure you'll be tuning in, watching all of it as well. UFC 279 this Saturday. Daniel Vreeland, I appreciate the time, my man. Go follow this guy on Twitter at Gumby Vreeland, and make sure you check out all of his content. The Top Turtle MMA podcast, one of the best in the business. Thank you again, my friend. We'll do this at some point again down the line.
Thanks for having me.